So in this demo, Malte is going to show us the first mission for the Global Defense Forces. And yeah, Malte, why don't you start it?
I'll go right ahead.
I just want to say, like, all the background lore and stuff, it's so interesting to listen to. Like, I would listen to that as a podcast on my way to work or something. I really like that.
So there's a lot of background lore. So here we'll get a little intro to the first mission.
Tempest harvesting operations have been disrupted in this area. Dynasty interference is suspected. Retake and hold the position. Await the arrival of a mobile construction vehicle, then build a base and recommence harvesting. Destroy any Dynasty forces and search for signs of a nearby Dynasty base.
Commander, good of you to join us. Gotta say, your file was a pretty impressive read. I'm Colonel Fisher. You'll be reporting directly to me. We can certainly use someone with your track record. Intelligence has a situation brewing in, in Iceland. We have routine Tempest harvesting all over the grid, but some of the lights are going out, starting from the east coast. If you ask me, I reckon it looks deliberate. I want you to do a sweep of the area, flush out any Dynasty forces you might find. Remind them that the GDF isn't to be trifled with. I'll link your control interface to the battle network. If you've got any questions, now's the time to voice them.
So, first of all, as some of you might recall from older real-time strategy games, we have a person giving you a briefing. Something that we really wish that we could do back in the old days was to ask these people questions, interact with them, get some insight into the story, what's going on, and there might be some things that you want to know about the next mission. What's happening with the civilians? What's the situation with Tempest? Like, there's so many questions, right? So, first of all of the what you can almost consider CG in the game is all real time. It's all in-game, real-time rendered. And this is Colonel Fisher. He's the guy, the first guy that you meet in the campaign, who's your general. There might be other people, and you might experience a lot of plot twists throughout the campaign and the story. But for now, you're under the impression that, all right, this is the guy you're listening to, and you have to do what he tells you. So. Now, Malte can ask him a few questions. So, Malte, why don't you try and ask him some questions?
The Tempest Dynasty isn't actually led by Domovoy Malkalin. You've seen his face. He's a figurehead, being puppeted around as a mascot. All because he founded the Dynasty, gave his people something to focus on in the fallout. It's PR. These days, he probably doesn't know where he is half the time. The Dynasty is actually controlled by Alex Malkalin, his son. That man's the reason the Dynasty even qualifies as a military, rather than a band of old men waving their sticks at the world because of how the war ended. They're a threat, sure, but only because they think they've got something to point. That's why we're here.
So, you can ask this guy more questions, you can learn a bit more about the backstory, and once you're done, you can say that you don't have any more questions. That's highlighted by the green text that kind of progresses through the story here.
Oh, nice.
Luck.
I really like his voice. It's so raspy and like he's been through some stuff.
Yes.
Let's see what you can do,
Good voice acting.
So, now you're in the command compound. And the command compound in the game is essentially your HQ. The command compound might change throughout the game depending on what happens in the story, the plot twists, etc. But in the command compound, you can do a lot of different things. As you can see up here, we have something called doctrine, commissary, armory. Those elements are some of those deeper RPG-like elements that we're opening up a bit later. But here in the first mission, in the first few missions in the game, we're just teaching the player just the basics. You know, Colonel Fisher needs to see, hey, can this guy or whoever's playing do the most basic? Can you solve a simple mission? And as you go through, more and more will unlock for you, more and more systems will be introduced to the player, and the game will open up for more and more advanced features. But for now, we can say goodbye to Colonel Fisher, and we can deploy in Iceland.
So that's what it makes it newbie friendly, because you have to play through that tutorial. So someone that didn't play those games back in the days, they still get into it.
Yeah, and the features we're introducing here were not part of those games back in the day either. So it's not really a tutorial. It's just the first mission introducing you to the core game mechanics, and then more and more will unlock and be open to you as you go through. But when you play it, it will all make sense in terms of the story, what's going on.
Okay, great.
We just have the buttons up there to kind of hint there's something that's going to unlock here.
I think also, if you noticed when we started the mission, we have the 3 different difficulties to pick from. So obviously we're creating a game that we would love to play, and also a game that really it's a love letter to the community of RTS games. But we obviously also want to create something that somebody new to the franchise or new to the genre can get into. And part of that is making sure that we have different difficulties, so we have something for everyone. And also the missions will serve as a way to teach the player new mechanics as they go, just naturally with how they progress through the various missions.
Just to answer a few questions here. So one from Zach Kip 910. The map that you saw in the beginning is where the story takes place for this faction currently. And even though Iceland is actually not located at that part of the map, we kind of move the sections together just to make sure that we don't see the entire world when you play this. So that's the reason why. There are also a question about whether there'll be modding tools and a map editor. For us at Slipgate and 3D Realms, modding and mapping is where many of us come from, and it's a very important thing for us. But at this current time, we're not really ready to talk about that yet.
Okay.
So we're now in the beginning of the mission here. Our first objective is, of course, we need to figure out what's going on with the Dynasty. We spotted them harvesting Tempest, and that's a really, really dangerous sign, especially nearing our zones. So first we need to find the supply outpost where they're keeping this. We have a little squad here. This is the most basic infantry in the game. These guys are called the Field Scouts. They are a bit more harder hitting than the basic infantry for the Dynasty. They also has a longer range. They have a longer range. And they're good all-around base infantry, pretty tough guys. So let's see if we can.
There's a question in chat if it's single player or multiplayer, and I think it's both, right?
It's both, absolutely. We have a full multiplayer component to the game as well, including matchmaking and so on. So
does the matchmaking get really competitive then?
Hopefully.
That sounds great.
We hope so. So here's the next unit we're introducing the player to. These are the drone operators. And the drone operators are really, really good against... they have a pistol against infantry, not as powerful. That's for like a last resort. And then they have these drones that they control. And these drones are really, really good against structures and vehicles. The cool thing about the drones is also they have special abilities. So if you look at the section in the corner of the screen, this bar here is for the special abilities of your units. And there's a lot of empty fields that we're not showing yet, but this drone operator can control his drone within a radius around him if you want to do some more specialized focused attacks with the drone itself. And of course, if you're not directly controlling the drone yourself, you can also just control the drone operator. The drone is also great for scouting on parts of the map which are higher than where you're located. So in order to see what's, for instance, on a cliff, you have to actually get up on it, but you can use the drones to kind of spy there ahead. So let's continue a bit. It looks like there's some heavier enemy infantry and vehicles down here. So let's see if Melly can deal with those guys. Of course, as in many games, the enemy has a very very nice way of placing their explosive barrels. So environmental destruction, such as explosive barrels, is a really cool thing that we miss from strategy games from the 90s. So especially in the first few missions, it's a nice way of introducing how you can use explosive barrels throughout the campaign, but also how you can destroy heavier enemy gear without actually having the amount of units required to do so in a traditional way.
Chat is asking if the drone operators can hack things and if there's super weapons.
So we do have call them special weapons. What they are and what they do is not really something we will talk about yet, but you will see an example of it in this map. The drone operators are not the hacker units of this faction. So as you can see here, we found the outpost, and we're now attacking it. As we found the outpost, a few new objectives have unlocked. These are side objectives. Side objectives in Tempest Rising are entirely optional, but they might unlock interesting things for you. So the side objectives here are that there are some SAM sites and some silos. The silos is what contains the Tempest that the Dynasty have been harvesting. And of course, they also have some SAM sites, which currently makes it impossible for us to fly in reinforcements. So hopefully, if we destroy the SAM sites, we will be able to fly in a few more reinforcements.
A question for the multiplayer: is there gonna be a co-op campaign in the scenario for the multiplayer, or is it just versus?
So we're not really ready to talk about co-op and so on yet. A lot of things here in the beginning, but we also have. The game is not coming out until 2023, so there's a lot of opportunity for us to talk about more deep about the multiplayer aspect, the matchmaking, the esports aspect, and so on of the game. So we got our reinforcements here. We got what's called a Riot Medic, and we got the Hunter Tank. The Riot Medic in the game is one of the specialists. The specialists are special in the campaign. You'll get to meet the specialists throughout the campaign, and they have their own storylines. In the Tempest Rising campaign, you can decide to, addition to the main storyline of the game, you can decide to help out different specialists in their own storylines in order to unlock some of them throughout the game. In this mission, we give you a little taste of one of the specialists, which is the Riot Medic. The Riot Medic is not a traditional medic. The Riot Medic can do a few different things besides healing your units. One of the special abilities of the Riot Medic here is a little healing turret. So if Malta tries to drop this little healing turret, all infantry within the radius of the turret will be automatically healed. So it's really, really good to place in choking points, for instance, where you get attacked by a lot of units at the same time. And if you have more of them, of course, they heal even more. But they are timer-based.
What's the cooldown?
So there's a cooldown on it as well. You can actually see it if you zoom in on the top. There's like a little ring that rotates around. But for demo purposes, we're giving him as much as he wants. The Hunter Tank is you can almost call it the bread and butter of the arsenal of vehicles for the GDF. The Riot Tank is the Hunter Tank is kind of an all-around tank that's really, really good against vehicles and structures. Not as good against basic infantry, but at least it can drive over them. Oh. As well as it can drive over trees and a lot of other things.
That's a fun thing.
Absolutely. So as we can see here, we cleared out the outpost here, and we destroyed the SAM site, which got us some reinforcements. So our next objective is to find the power plant outpost. It also appears there are more SAM sites, so we have gotten intel about a few more SAM sites here.
Oh.
That Tempest rig is getting away!
So, this is the Dynasty Tempest rig. This was what we saw in the intro cinematic for this mission. Every single mission in the game has an intro cinematic and an outro cinematic. So there's a ton of cinematics in the game as well to further the story. The Tempest rigs are the way for the Dynasty to harvest Tempest. It's a pretty interesting vehicle. Its wheels actually detach from its base, and the wheels drive out into the Tempest field and will harvest the Tempest, drive back in, and feed it into the Tempest rig. So this means that you can actually drive your refinery out to the actual Tempest field, and that way the rate of which you make money as the Dynasty is much faster than it is with the GDF. On the contrary, their refinery, the Tempest rig, is out there, out in the field, often away from the base, which makes it much more vulnerable as well. As you can see here, we also had a few soldiers here. Their plane got shut down, and they were left here, and they were trying to defend themselves. By saving these guys, you get access to them. These are the Grenadiers, another great unit for the GDF. Grenadiers are really good against buildings and infantry, and now you can see they're being healed by the Riot Medic.
They're so tanky looking.
They're very tanky, yeah. Alright, so we got a new objective here. We found that Tempest rig we saw in the intro cinematic, so let's see if we can destroy it. But our main objective here is still, we need to find the outpost of the Dynasty and destroy them.
Okay.
If they're destroyed, Whether or not the Tempest rig is still there doesn't matter. They don't have a place to put the money anyways. But if we find the Tempest rig as well, we will solve one of the side objectives. One really awesome little detail is, as you can see, the game is very, very detailed. We have a lot of a level of detail variations of our infantry and units and so on. So that means when you play the game from this distance, it actually runs extremely fast, very, very smooth on a big variety of different machines. But if you zoom in, you get a ton of detail, and you actually, the units you see in this in the game are actually the same as we use in the cinematics.
Wow.
So when we record the cinematic, we use the models from here. Of course, we toggle on higher, 4K, 8K textures and so on. But it's actually the same units, structures, vehicles that we use in our intro-outro cinematics.
Primary objective accomplished.
How far could you zoom out?
You can zoom out this much
Like
right now.
okay.
Yeah. So we found the outpost here. So now it's time to destroy those power plants. And luckily, there are also red explosive barrels around the power plants.
Is there a specific reason why this game is set in 1997?
It's set in 1997 because it works within our lore and our story. We thought that would also be a cool setting if you imagine that there was a nuclear war in the 60s, and all of a sudden throughout the 70s and 80s, you get access to almost infinite amount of power from these little fusion reactor resources. Like, what would technology then look like? So there are sci-fi elements in the game, but they're almost based around like the idea of retro sci-fi. You see a bit of that in some awesome sci-fi movies from the 80s and 90s where, they still use floppy disks and they still use old hard drives and so on, and big CRT monitors, but they also have a lot of sci-fi elements in there. That's the kind of clunky sci-fi, almost used, dirty sci-fi look that we really like. We think it's really charming. You see a tank here that's clearly inspired by a real-world tank from the time, but it also has some sci-fi elements to it and so on. So that's a style as well that we really like. So there's the Tempest rig.
Incoming transmission.
And finally, we get our reinforcements. So this is the mobile construction vehicle, and it unfolds into the construction yard. The construction yard is the base building required for you in order to construct other structures in the game. So through the construction yard, you will unlock your tech tree, which is based on the type of structures you have. So as you can see here in this demo, we have 6 buildings unlockable, and depending on which you build, you will unlock others. The tech tree can be you can go into in-depth in the tech tree in the command compound as well to get more info about what you can unlock later on in the game and so on. But first of all, we need power. So we're building our power plant here. We also destroyed the Tempest rig. You can see the way that the GDF constructs buildings is that they are essentially placing a construction site, and the construction site has a little antenna, and this shows where the package will be delivered. So the way that GDF builds is that the construction yard builds these packages that unfolds into the construction, and you have these drones that will pick up the package and deliver it to your construction site. So right now we're building a refinery to harvest Tempest. As you can see here, we have the drone picking up the package and delivering it to the construction site.
New construction options.
So this is our refinery and our Tempest harvester. So the GDF has a bit more of a traditional way of harvesting. They have a harvester that goes out. As you can see, it has a little a meter that fills up on the top, and then it drives back and delivers its Tempest into this big refinery here.
It's kind of cute. It looks like it has a face.
Yeah, it's awesome. So this is the way that the global defense forces are harvesting that Tempest. Next up, let's build a barracks so we can start to expand our forces.
So you're talking about the tech tree and everything, so there's probably a lot of different approaches to the game. Do you have a favorite approaching style?
Yeah, so that's actually something we wanted to really focus on this game. In a lot of games, this is inspired by from the 90s and 2000s. whenever you get really good at these games, there's usually a single or two types of playing the game that always secures a win. For many games, that's rushing. You know, it's focusing mostly on creating a lot of units and attacking the enemy base. Whereas those who like to build a nice base and defenses, that's usually not the winning strategy. So we wanted to try and balance that out a bit more. Like for me personally, for instance, I love building a great base. I love building great walls, turrets, gates, and really make like a nice looking, feeling base that's protected before I start building up a large army. And that's also an option here. That's something that's carried on from older games in the genre as well. So we actually do have, as you can see here on the defense tab, we do have walls. For this demo right here, we have the sandbags wall, we have the heavy wall, and then we have a gate as well. You can use those to kind of build like a little fortress with a gate that only opens for your own units. As you can see, Malte has also built 2 defensive turrets here. These are the Gatling turrets. They're really, really strong against infantry. As you can see, they're attacking us now with their flame troopers and the basic infantry of the Dynasty guards. So next up here, Malte is starting to build his defenses by creating a few walls. So these are the heavy walls, as you can see. Nice little detail, like if he builds on top of a tree, the trees will automatically collapse and fall over.
Oh.
And again, these wall defenses is a really good way to keep the enemy out of your base. In order for them to get into your base, they actually have to destroy the walls.
So they can climb over it or send drones over it?
They can send drones and aircraft over the walls, yeah. Next up, Malte is here building the radar station in the game, which will unlock a few more elements in the tech tree.
Constructing.
And as you can see, he also has 2 more tabs available here. He has the infantry tab and the vehicles tab available, where he can build both, of course, infantry and vehicles from his vehicle bay.
Construction complete.
So now he's starting to slowly build up a slightly bigger army here, and as you can see, we also have a few more side objectives. These side objectives are to, they're not usually part of this mission, but they are to show the people here at Gamescom that, hey, you can actually build tanks. If you try and build 4 of them, you'll also solve a little objective here. So, as you can see, we now found the 2 last SAM sites in this map, which were part of the side objectives. So let's see what happens when Malte destroys these. But first of all, as you can see, they're heavily fortified here.
Unit lost.
Someone in the chat asked what the F key is for.
F keys are shortcuts. So every single ability, button, click, everything in the entire game has keyboard shortcuts. So for the more competitive players, you can control almost most of the game with a keyboard, or mouse only if you prefer that as well. So as you can see here, the SAM sites are actually destroying the drones from the drone operator. But he destroyed the SAM site, and there's 1 more left. So let's see what happens.
Incoming transmission. Stand by.
Larfhand is asking, can the walls block certain types of attacks?
Unit lost.
Yes, they can block the most basic attacks that are ground level. So as you can see here, Malte unlocked the airstrike ability. And the airstrike ability was a gift given to Malte by destroying the SAM sites in the game. The airstrike was a really, really useful weapon for Malte here to destroy the main gate of the base. So now he opened up this choke point in order for him to get into the base. So the main base here has 1 main building. In order to completely disable the Dynasty's ability to construct any buildings, we need to destroy their construction yard. Without a construction yard, they can't construct any buildings whatsoever. The only way to get a construction yard back is to build a mobile construction vehicle, which is one of the last things you can build in your tech tree. So you have to be really far in the game in order for you to gain the ability to build mobile construction vehicles. But again, when you build them, you can also start building multiple bases away from each other.
Is there a cap on how big your infantry can get?
How many units you can get?
Yeah.
Yes, so we do have a cap. We would love to, as much as anyone, to have infinite amounts of units and screens, but we also have to take care of people's GPUs and CPUs. Yeah. So when you have unit caps in these types of games where you're going for such high fidelity, it's mainly because we want to make sure that enough people can actually play them. But the unit cap is pretty high here, and we're still experimenting a bit with how high can we actually go for most people, even with beefier systems, to be able to run the game even at low settings. So it's still a balance, and that's something that we'll continue to tweak. But I can already promise you that the unit cap here is pretty large. You can have a lot of units compared to many other RTS games out there, especially those that this game was inspired by the 90s. So this is the construction yard, and finally Malde got enough units here to destroy it, and yeah, he cleared out Iceland, not all of Iceland, but at least the Dynasty's presence in Iceland, and yeah, he finished the first mission.